All right, good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's great to have you with us today. We want to play a little around in the future of air travel. Now, you joined the session here from the edX Business School. We're the chair which works on foresight, innovation, and transformation. And we are a business school which is a bit all over France and also with a campus in London and Singapore. We are a business school with some 8,000 day students, plus some executives. And we've been in contact with this topic of flying, not just because our students, of course, need to get to us, but also because we have been working with different players in the industry for the last year. And today we want to show some of the things we have been working on, and also play a little bit together with you, thinking about what is the future of air travel, what's the future of the industry, but also what is the implications out of that for the way we do business. And we have two sessions. We have the first session today, where we're going to look at a lot of interactive polls and want to understand a little bit more how you see things going forward. And then in the afternoon, we have a session where we want to work on scenario planning with you. So the session this morning is structured in four major steps. In the first one, we just want to warm up a little bit and see what is driving the industry change right now. Then we look into what did we do in the project with two major airlines, with two major airports, with manufacturers, and also with some third parties of the industry. Then we're going to look at some of the solutions with some 120 students have been working on. And then we want to fast forward a little bit and try to anticipate, try to predict what the future will look like in the air industry. You'll see that for every step there's also some live polling, and we're actually going to go into this in a minute. For that, you can either choose to do the polls through your desktop computer, or you can also use your mobile phone. That's both is very easy to do. So let me first zoom us a little bit in. The air travel industry is one which has seen many crises before. We remember the oil crisis all the way back. Also crises triggered by the Iran-Iraq war, the Gulf crisis, the Asian crisis, the 9/11 attacks were been grounded for multiple days, and where then the reluctance to travel plus the additional measures for anti-terrorism fight have slowed down the industry for a longer period of time. We had the SARS crisis as well, and we had the financial crisis. Now you can see in this historical graph that each of those crises has actually also meant a slowdown in passenger traffic. If we look, however, at today's crisis, we see that the order of magnitude is completely different. So this time around, some airlines have been for many months doing only some 1 to 5% of the passenger traffic which they used to have. And that means that the industry is challenged in a way which it has never been challenged before, and in a way which hardly any industry you can think about has been challenged before. And the big question with this at the start has been for many, how long will this last until this gets back to normal? This rhetoric has changed over the last couple of months, where we see that many changes are now starting to become more permanent. And this is really what we want to discuss today, to see what is the underlying change drivers which might change the airline industry in a more permanent way. So when the crisis really started to hit in, we were already in some projects with the airline industry, and then it was very natural for us to say, why don't we try to make a larger project where we work with multiple partners across the industry and the broader value chain to work out what can be done to make us sort of fit to fly again. The question of sanitary measures, the question of how do layouts in airports, in airplanes need to change. Also questions of business models. Do we need to also think differently about how air traffic is organized? Will we still be able to, for instance, operate these large networks, which many of these large airlines have built their business model on, or will it be more point to point? And we created a project with a program where we started with a lot of horizon scanning, looking into future trends of the industry. What are the future change drivers? We also worked with scenarios. We worked with customer journeys, and some of these results we want to showcase today. Before we go there, I'd like to get you a little bit involved here and start challenging your mind. Now, here are two change drivers which we have been discussing a lot. The first change driver here is business travel. Now, I don't know how it has been for you, but at this time of the year, I typically have filled up my frequent traveler card quite a lot. Been traveling many times. This time around this year, I made only 2 air trips for the entire year, which is something which then has a number of consequences. The first consequence is that when you don't consume budget in large firms, then this budget typically goes away. And there's many firms we talk to which have put all their travel budgets for this year to zero. And for next year, some told us they have actually no travel budget for the first 6 months. And as you know, in large organizations, once the budget is gone, it's very hard to find it again or get it back. The other thing which happens is that you start to finding alternatives. And later today, we'll be playing also with one of those alternatives, these virtual whiteboards, which people start to use to organize interactive work sessions live online in the virtual space. And both sort of lead to less travel, and less travel then creates a feedback loop, which leads again to less budgets and more use of alternatives. So the first question you will be asked in a minute for our little poll system is, do you think business traveling will come back to the levels we've seen before? The second change driver is one which is maybe not so apparent, but what we have been, particularly in the 90s of the last century, still very dominantly have been thinking about is that globalization is essentially there to stay. It's something where we're just going to see a continuous high level of trading across continents. And with this COVID crisis, much of this has been also put in question. Big companies are regionalizing their supply chains. We see much less traveling picking up in intercontinental travel, which is of course first due to the legal requirements and the sanitary measures, and only limited amounts of so-called air bubbles, which allow you to connect to different continents. But the question here is, of course, will this tracing back or bringing back supply chains closer to home, will that also lead to what we call here a drive towards regionalization, where trading will happen more on a continent than across continents? So time to get to some voting for you. I first need to share the link with you. So in order to participate in this session, you can do now 2 things. You can go into this link here, You can also use your mobile phone and scan this 3D barcode. And you can also check in the Teams meeting, there's also the link posted there. So once you follow me in there, you will start seeing a poll coming up. So let me bring that up to you. And maybe just one more thing. Good. So I'll be just opening my little polling. So here's is the poll. I think I just wanted to show this barcode once more. So here's the barcode if you want to start voting with your mobile phone. And the first question I would like to ask here is, in your opinion, will business travel come back to pre-COVID levels or not? So let's see if we can get people here on WooClap. I'm also going to check back here in my Teams meeting just to see if I have some people joining me here. Okay, so here we have so far a rather clear picture on nose. What would be interesting for me, of course, to see, and I don't know if that's that possible. I mean, it's not possible here, but interestingly, of course, we see also quite a different distribution in this. So there is a lot of flight levels, and I'm going to show you some statistics on that in a minute. Flight levels are coming up in Asia. Flight levels are somewhat coming up in Europe, but mostly for short haul. Much of the intercontinental travel is still on a very, very low level. So what we often see when we ask this across an international cohort, then we'll see that there's quite a difference, because when they look outside the window or when they look at flight levels in their home country, then it's quite different there. So we see here so far a 14% to 86% split. The second question I would like to ask here is, will the crisis promote this more regionalization and less intercontinental travel? So let's see how the response on this is. So here the race has started, some 1-1 here on either side. So as I said before, the idea here is that we are sort of conscious or maybe even concerned that the longer this crisis lasts, the more we will have this regionalization of supply chains, and with that then also the regionalization of traveling. So here we see that we are more optimistic, that we'll have more, that we will continue to have a high level of globalization, a high level of intercontinental travel, and that this regionalization will be promoted only to a certain extent. So we have a slight majority here saying, no, we believe that this international traveling is actually going to come back to large levels. It's also good news for many of our students who might not originate from France and who are also dependent on these long-haul flights to get back home, and they're also reliant on this at a good price level. So thanks very much for warming us up here a little bit on what we perceive from the different perspectives. And now I'm going to take you back to my slides. So when we think about these two change drivers, there's a number of additional change drivers. I have also recently written a small article about two other change drivers, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But this business travel had a huge impact, and many believe that this is not going to come back as fast or even at all to the levels which we have seen before. And regionalization is something which is still very much in the air, I think, which was very well reflected by the responses. Now, another way of approaching a change in an industry is starting from a customer perspective. And here we started to work with an assessment of the customer journey. So when you look at this customer journey, one thing which already sticks out is that for the main players in the airline industry, they often see the customer journey starting at the airport and ending sort of when you take a cab. But when you're in COVID times, you need to broaden this horizon and say, well, essentially, I already need to make the decision to fly at all. This is something which happens at home. I need to feel that traveling by air is a good idea, it's something I like, etc. So what we see here is roughly a customer journey from what we call here a pre-COVID traveler. So somebody who has been traveling when all this COVID situation has not been with us yet. There's a couple of sore points in this customer journey. We see that getting to the airport is not always easy, which might favor different means of transportation. Departure is sometimes one of these situations where your body temperature is rising a little bit, your heart starts to beat a bit faster, it's a bit odd how you board planes, maybe there's also a lot of queues which you don't like, which makes this part of the customer journey not so attractive. Then in flight, generally the service is quite good. At arrival, you might have same situation as before, that it's a bit crowded, etc. Often it's also quite annoying then to get from the airport to wherever you want to, particularly if it's a foreign country, you have difficulties finding a cab or paying the right price for the cab, etc. So if that has been the pre-COVID customer journey, then when we think about the customer journey within the COVID times, then we like to differentiate frequent travelers and sort of non-frequent travelers. What we see with the frequent travelers is that many have commented that they want to go back to flying. There has been reasons why they took planes. Often it can be simply for the speed of commute. And for them, it has become much more difficult now to organize their trip and have some visibility on the travel times. So the sort of less inclination to travel is starting already at home. It stays sort of difficult, but not impossible on the way to the airport, at the airport. Departure is typically something which is now much more complicated than before. The social distancing rules, they're very different from airport to airport. In flight, many are actually, which we talk to, not so concerned about the risk of infection in the flight. So they basically, once they sit there, are satisfied again and have a similar level of satisfaction than before. Arrival, then same thing. You're getting hit by potentially tests on arrival, additional checks, waiting lines, etc., etc. So overall, for the frequent traveler within COVID times, they are still eager to get back, also because they want this service back to get fast to the place they want to go. But they have much more headwind and have it therefore it's not so attractive as it was before. What is even a starker contrast from our analysis is the indifferent traveler. So this is the leisure traveler who could either book a holiday for which they can reach by car or by train, or they can take a flight. Earlier it would have been maybe a 50-50 decision on slightly preference more for flying or more for another means of transportation. It could have been simply a matter of price at that moment, which means of transport they take. And here we hear a lot of concerns already early on. So what you already see here from our little color coding is that for travelers which have not either a very strong inclination to travel by plane for whatever reasons, or that they really need it because they're trying to get to a place where there is no other means of transportation, this type of traveler group is very difficult to get back. There's other much more stable traveler groups, for instance, our students which need to get back to campus, also other types of workers who are working in a quite different place on our planet than where they originate from, so they're going back home to celebrations, they go home to see their families, etc., etc. These are way more stable groups, but when it comes to this larger group of indifferent travelers, then this is very difficult to see that they will be coming back before this crisis would be for them feeling completely solved. And this is what we see also in numbers. So when we look at the numbers in not such a long historical overview that we had before, but more in the shorter term horizon, then we do see that we have some traveling coming back up. We have also the flight capacity coming up first. So we'll see that a lot of seats are being offered, and much of that reason has also to do with ensuring that your slots stay active, that you as an airline, you keep your slots, that you keep also connections so that you can have enough feeder flights in order to then serve the long-haul flights. So seat capacity is coming up first, then the purple line here, the domestic passengers, they're coming up first because on domestic traveling, then the sanitary measures are easiest to follow. And then what comes up last is the international passenger numbers. What is, of course, also clear is that already towards September, October, these lines, they were not racing back to pre-COVID levels, but they were starting to flatten out. And in many newer numbers now, with the second wave hitting many parts of the world, some of those numbers are declining also again. So with this, I would like to take us back to our little WooClap exercise, and I want to take you to a time in the future. So we are just on the breach of 2021, and on purpose I would like to take you all the way to 2025. So where presumably at least the current sanitary crisis is fully managed. And I would like to ask you a few questions there. So I'm going to go back to my little poll and start the new question. So let's imagine we're in 2025. What do you expect here now? Would the traffic levels be the same as pre-COVID? Would it be more than 20%, 25% more, or between 0 and 25%? Would we have less? Would we have much less, more than 25% less? Let's see what we feel this could look like. Good. So far, still bullish, at least about coming back to the same level as we have been. We had also in the past an annual growth rate of about 3.5%. So if we would be coming back to the same levels as we have been, and then going beyond this, then we should actually be higher in 2025. But we see that also here in 4 and 5, so this up to 25% less, or even much less than the 25%, has some votes. So indeed, we have some concerns here still that even after managing the sanitary crisis, there could be some more stable influencing factors. And we'll come back to 2 more of those influencing factors a bit later in the session today. Good, so thanks for voting on that. Okay, and some last minute votes coming in also on the top one. Now, this was your expectations for the entire industry. What I would like to ask you now is more a question about your personal travel behavior. So let's imagine again we're in 2025. How often would you personally fly? Would you fly more or less? Interesting. 2 extremes already available. So more than 25%, less. Later in the session, we'll also try to link that to the drivers of this. So thinking a little bit more about what will drive this change in potential consumption. Is it because I'm going to have a job which requires me to travel more? Am I going to personally become more prosperous, that I be able to sort of visit places I want to visit and can not permit that myself today? What is driving this? So we see that here we have a slight balance more towards lesser flying. We have also a lot who say, well, it will be presumably approximately the same as now. Very good. Now, essentially, between now and 2025, there's also still a number of challenges which we have to overcome and a couple of things we need to solve. We'll have some challenges to overcome in terms of how do we manage the sanitary situation going forward. Will we then up to 2025 have through vaccination everything so under control that we are having the same travel experience and same sanitary standards than pre-crisis? Or do we need to reimagine customer journeys? And we put this question to our students. We had a project which looked roughly like this. So we started a project with one course, which is a course I run on foresight and strategic design, with some 120 students in their final year of the masters. So students which from our programs have also spent already a year in industry before. They're now in their final year. And we put them to the task of thinking together with 13 partners from the airline industry, the same partners you saw in the slides earlier. So it was 2 major airlines, 2 airports, different manufacturers. And we asked them to first identify very specific needs which you have as a traveler within COVID times, or as an airline operator, as an airport operator. We also challenged them to come up with concrete personas, so people you can think about when designing solutions. And we asked them to look into how future trends would be translated into drivers and challenged them to come up with solutions. Once they had solutions, we asked them then to also move towards the market and think about how can that be technically be feasible, how can that be financially viable. And they had roughly a month to work on these solutions. That is, however, also not a full month of working. That is a month time, and then there's also other courses which they have to follow at the same time. So let me first show you a little video, and these videos which I'm showing here, if you, for whatever reasons, you can not see them properly when I play them, there'll be also a link to a YouTube site where you can watch it. So let's first get a little impression of what this project looked like and how it was set up and who was part of it. Okay, so this was a little introductory video to show you a little bit the setting. So the students had time to also get mentoring from these different companies which you just seen, or different organizations. You also saw IATA, which represents the airline industry, or the airlines around the world, also enforcing standards and so on. So they had also a lot of feedback on what's feasible. Now, what I want to do here with you in a minute is two things. So there's a couple of solutions which I want you to show to check out. These solutions, they are also coming in little videos, and you can use the chat or the Q&A section section in Teams to also ask questions about these solutions. And I want you to form an opinion also about which solution you like, because after you've seen the solution, you'll also have another little poll coming up where I would like to get a little bit of your feedback and say, well, this is actually appealing, this I find interesting, this I find also feasible, or this is something which is from a business point of view an interesting thing to pursue. So I'll take you back to the slides and to this little video, and let's check out what this is about. I'll be also already starting the WOOC lab so that you can start voting, but of course would be the idea to first look at all the solutions. So let's check out the first solution, which was created by Charlotte, Sophie, Victor, Sophie, Anne, and Ariane, and it's called the Travel and Care Loyalty Program.
Hello, we are Team B9, and this is how we came up with Travel and Care. It all started with some research about future travelers. Who are they? What do they want? And most importantly, what is their relationship with traveling? And this is what we got from our interviews. I love taking the plane. Beyond being a convenient transportation method, it's also an exciting activity itself. The food, the comfort, the view, and the overall experience on board is just really fun and enjoyable. I'm not really worried about COVID-19, since I'm young and healthy. I'm just frustrated not to be able to travel again. Being locked down for so long has made me reconsider new closer destinations, like Greece or Spain, for example. This led us to create our target persona. Nicole is 24, she lives in France, and she's a student. She enjoys trying new things and likes to share it on social media. She is eco-conscious and actively trying to minimize her carbon footprint. She's frustrated by COVID crisis and she cannot wait to be able to travel again. She's not particularly afraid of COVID considering her young age, and she loves to take the plane and enjoys the flight experience. So to sum it up, Nicole has a lot of free time with a very limited budget, which means there's an opportunity to use this time to create an asset valuable to the consumers, airlines, and the planet. And this is how we created our Travel and Care program. Travel and Care is a loyalty program for young travelers who want to explore the world but do not yet have a stable financial situation. Their task is to complete missions for environmental organizations in exchange for points added to their personal customer account. Users can pick missions available near their location with airline partners, environmental organizations, or charities. They can earn points depending on the time and difficulty of the mission. For example, beach or street cleaning, charity support, tree planting, etc. Now for the fun part. After earning enough points, users can use them to plan their next trip. Depending on the number of points earned, they have access to more or less premium advantages. For example, under 1,000 points, they could have an access to the lounge or more baggage allowance. From 1,000 points, they could have discounts on booking. And from 5,000 points, they would have business class offers, for example. Now, each user has their own personal dashboard with an overview of their activity, number of missions completed, their travel cash balance, or their destination wish list, and anything can be shared on social media. To register a mission, users have to get the confirmation form from the organization they work for. Then, they use their smartphone to scan the QR code on the form and add it to their account. And voila, now the points are added to their travel cash balance. Now, why is it a financially stable project? Before COVID-19, European students had on average 4.2 travels planned per year. This number dropped down to 1 as a result of the pandemic. What Travel and Care would do is that it would impact the demand on flights by increasing travel frequency among young students. The result? Planes will be flying at higher capacities, which would reduce the operation costs caused by empty seats. After a 1-year financial projection using the main revenues and cost drivers, break-even is attained only 6 months after initial investments. Gross margin of the project is 1% and is expected to increase in the medium term. In the long run, there will be an impact on the loyalty of these travelers, given the early work on acquisition and retention strategies. This new generation is highly conscious of their actions' impact on the environment. Having the ability to compensate their carbon emissions with their actions will also result in a greater social purpose and improve airlines' brand images.
Good. So that was our first program. What I particularly like about this one was this connection all the way from the airlines to the environmental conscious consumer to the program in the back end, so to speak, of this, where these young people can actively participate. It's also interesting to see that for young people, everything seems to be an app, which will be a bit of a common thread here in the different solutions. So that was our first solution, which you already see also on our WOOC lab. Now, the second one is really about taking the airport situation into consideration, thinking about what does it actually take in these times to get in contact with services at the airport, which you might in current times even spend more time, not less, to wait for your plane, to wait for sanitary checks, etc. This was prepared here by Cindy, Estelle, Baptiste, Liao, and Elise, also an international team, as you can see, and they call it the app extension for airport services. So let's check this one out.
Each day, billions of people pass through airports to eat, shop, and look for entertainment. However, due to COVID-19, our behavior has changed, and so did our way of traveling. To avoid as much as possible passengers' contact, they need to stay on the waiting areas. But it's not that simple. To do so, we have to tackle two pain points. First of all, food. As we all know, passengers like to eat before the flight, and this represents a high revenue for airports. However, during COVID-19, it's no longer possible to have all restaurants open. Sitting at a table, or even going on a click and collect is the best way to create long queues near restaurants. This is not desirable during COVID-19. That's why we will offer a delivery service. We've all already experienced the empty Terminal D while our favorite fast food was on Terminal A, isn't it? This is why all airport restaurants will be delivered where you are seated, and this not depending on where the boarding gate is located or which restaurants are nearby. At the first step, those deliveries will be made by persons currently unemployed due to the crisis. On the second step, it will be autonomous deliveries using small electric vehicles. Unfortunately, food won't solve everything. We need to entertain our passengers to make sure they are not moving too much within the airport. On the app, they will have access to a wide offer of ratings, video, and other content, all adapted to the time passengers ask before the boarding time. To have related content, it will be partnerships, Spotify for music, Script for audiobooks, Stitcher for podcasts, and TED for conferences. Once on this app, passengers will receive a notification when it's time to present themselves to the boarding desk. To avoid crossing too many people, the back of the plane will receive the notification before the front seats. All airports already have their own app, so our solution is to extend it in order to help passengers to stay at their pace. But it goes beyond offering an extra. This solution will be a real incentive for people to download the app and thereby enter their data. So, are you ready to get on board?
So you can imagine that after I saw this, I was directly looking up whether I can buy already one of these little robots which come to me with the nice food. There's a lot of interesting ideas here how you make this electronic world connect with your physical world in order to then make your physical world more easy to manage in COVID times, but also more comfortable in times after that. They take here the airport as a central element. What one can also wonder is to which extent that should be even more passenger-centric, that it's not an app linked to an airport, but an app linked to your entire customer journey. But that would, of course, make it also way more complex. And now there's the third one of the three which I want to show you now. And the third one is called the Green Launch Evolution, and was prepared by Shraman, Andrea, Sarah, Lorraine, and Jean. And without further words from my side, let's check out what they have come up with.
Our target audience, business travelers, lead a luxurious lifestyle, are members of the best lounges, and are on the frequent flyer list of several companies. They are more and more aware of the huge environmental footprint of their lifestyle and are interested in the eco-friendly luxury experience. In a recent BCG survey of more than 3,000 people across 8 countries, it was found that about 70% of participants were more aware now than before the pandemic that human activity threatens the climate and the environment, and about 40% reported that they intend to adopt more sustainable behavior in the future. Also, lounge access at airports has seen an uptick after the pandemic. 7 out of 10 passengers are willing to pay to access it, and about 57% of them plan to use their airport lounge access more than they did before the pandemic. So, the objective of our project is to create an eco-responsible lounge. We propose this solution for airport and airline lounges. We are green lounges, independent partners driving lounges towards a much greener transition. Firstly, we will rethink the energy management in lounges to reduce the consumption of energy. Then, for the passengers, we will be providing an array of eco-responsible services, such as eco-friendly themed decor, sustainably curated food menu by world-famous chefs using seasonal and local produce, gyms with green sport machines, sustainable cutlery, and furniture. For each traveler using our lounge services, money would be donated to environmental organizations to offset the carbon emissions generated by the air journey. All of this will be done keeping in mind security requirements at the airport. Our idea of offering a green lounge will be technologically feasible in a short span of time. We will be using the following technological innovations to make the lounge eco-friendly. Intelligent Wi-Fi water leak detectors that will allow the lounge to save water, grey water system using the water from sinks for washrooms to avoid waste. If the airport is near the sea, then a green AC system to pump naturally cold water from the depths of the sea to supply the lounge's air conditioning systems, a pathogen zone with pads on the floor that convert kinetic energy from walking into storable electricity, and an e-board smart table capable of producing green energy through artificial light. Our business model for the first year would be a B2B one, focusing on business travelers, wherein we sell the green lounge services to corporate companies. An advantage here is that this would be tied to the CSR of these companies. But since there's a huge chunk of premium leisure travelers who would be willing to avail this service, we would also start expanding to them once we create our own green lounges. They would be directly able to reserve seats using the smartphone app. To simplify the implementation, we would first focus our efforts on France, and then expand to other EU countries, and then to other continents. Now talking about numbers, here's the P&L summary for the year 2021 and 2025. Our main costs include renovation and maintenance, marketing and advertising, employee salary, rented space in lounges, donations to ecological causes, and other operational and admin costs. Our main revenue streams are the monthly fee from companies in our B2B business, commissions from lounges, advertising revenue inside the Green Lounge, business and data consulting services for lounges, and reservation charges for the B2C business. We plan to scale our business, generating a revenue of about 35 million euros by the year 5 of operations, netting a pre-tax profit of about 6.8 million euros. We also expect to have about 1.5 million business and premium leisure travelers on our platform by the end of 2025.
So with these three little examples, we just wanted to showcase a little bit what students come up with, also what they can come up with in a short period of time when we apply some pressure for grading in making sure that they look also in different directions, so not just the appeal to a customer, but also the technical feasibility, also some first ideas on the financial viability. And now I just want to invite you again to our little WOOC lab to get a bit of a feedback on what do you think about these free solutions. So as before, you can use your mobile phone to scan the 3D barcode. You can also go to the link here, and you should have also seen the link in your Teams rooms through which you have joined here. I'll be now also moving over to WOOC lab to check out who the winner is here. All right, so far we have some 9 votes in here. The winner so far is the Care loyalty program. I think it's also one which is particularly well made in terms of simply the video, how it works, how it comes in for the needs of the persona they focused on, and then also the work they've put into mocking up this customer journey in the app and how it works to click and collect your points and redeem your points, etc. Once the voting is done, I'm also going to give away what the judges from the industry have been saying to these different solutions. They had also a bit more to go on, to be fair. There's also a report on how they have thought about the desirability, about the feasibility and the viability of those solutions. So you have a bit less information here than our professional judges, so to speak. And what they have said is actually in the order as you see it here on the screen. The number one was the gold medal out of 24 teams. The second one was actually the silver medal, which here didn't sound as appealing to our audience here today. Maybe it was also a bit biased in the judges that many of them see the airport experience right now in COVID times as something which is a really pressing matter. And for all of you who have traveled, they probably would agree here that in the airports is really where a lot of good things can happen in the short term. And then the green launch evolution is also quite popular among our audience here today. So thanks very much for joining on this little voting exercise. Now, to get back to our question, how will the air travel industry look like going forward? I would like to take you to some more influencing factors. And sorry, the first thing I'd like to talk about here is the question whether the hub and spoke model, which has rightly been linked to this fast spread of the COVID virus simply because of this these big hubs which bring together so many people from different parts of the world, different parts of journeys they've been on. In simulations, you can easily show that if all of the traveling would have happened in point-to-point connections rather than in hub-based systems, then the virus would not have spread it as fast. And the other thing which sort of right now is challenging the hub and spoke model is that essentially it has been growing so well because it was offering these many very convenient type of connections, so that you can even go from a very small city to a very small city in a reasonable amount of time, taking two what the airline industry called feeder flights, has been something which has been making the market grow very fast. One can not imagine that you will have point-to-point connections from a third-tier city in one country to a third-tier city in another one. Even a second-tier city in one country and a second-tier city in another country is very hard to imagine point-to-point connections. But through the hub and spoke model, where you go to a central hub and then go to your second leg of the journey, that allowed to connect so many different cities around the world with each other. But will it survive? The question resonates a lot about, can we imagine to have these very big planes back, which go intercontinental and which makes much of the profitability for large network airlines? Or will the low-cost carriers with their point-to-point business model be the winners in the end of this crisis? The second element, should have probably also asked the audience how many of you would say that in their country this flight shaming is already an issue. I have been working a long time in the Nordics, and the Nordics, they have typically the problem that you have very, very long winter, which is not very nice to do outdoor sports or to do anything outside, really. So many in the Nordics, they had a habit to take a plane in the wintertime. And this is also why this flight shaming trend has really originated in the Nordics and Europe, in particular in Sweden, where they started saying this cannot be seen as normal to burn so much CO2 going on a winter getaway to some distant country like Thailand or elsewhere. This is something which led a lot to this feeling of, shouldn't we question more for which purposes we take the plane? So these are two important drivers to watch. What we do as futurists is that we look also for signals. What for me was very interesting to see is the huge backlash which companies like Qantas had when they were doing these flights to nowhere. Because essentially I was at first sight thinking, well, it's just another way of doing a trip, but of course we realized that people found that then very, very odd. That people take a plane, fly around the Great Barrier Reef, around Ayers Rock, come back. Is that really something which we can do in a country where there's then also a lot of bushfires which threaten us and which are linked to climate change, etc. So these two change drivers are change drivers to watch, for sure. When we go forward, what we do as futurists, that we work with change drivers, we also work with innovative ideas, and then we work with scenarios to dig deeper what would be consistent and plausible futures. This is actually something which we will do later on today. So at Central European time, 1 o'clock, we'll be running a live session on scenario planning. For that session, you need to sign up. In order to sign up for this session, you would need to send an email to Lisa, and we'll be posting also Lisa's email address here in the chat from the Teams room. But if you want to co-create with us on this whiteboard, you need to have a personal link, which you can only get by sending us an email. So don't forget to do that if you want to join this afternoon session. Now, before we leave here from this session today, I would like to have a last feedback from you on what would be your preferred future. And there's a couple of questions I would like to ask you there. So go back to your WOOC lab, and there's a couple of questions there. So one question is about your flying behavior, also about price levels, and also about other types of questions we have around flying. So let's have a look at the WOOC lab again. I'll be also switching over so that we can see the results. And here is my WOOC lab. So some people are keen to get their wings back, but would love to find that with new fuels. There's a lot of fast maneuvering in the industry to see what kind of solutions are available. We saw the big announcement from Airbus, for instance, looking into hydrogen, looking into electricity. Interestingly, there's already some planes flying around with electricity only. So far, this is, however, only small distance planes. So there's some very nice to fly electric airplanes connecting Vancouver and Victoria on Vancouver Island, for instance, or going further to Seattle. There's some small water planes which flying already 100% electric. For long haul flights, the energy density is simply not there to make this happen. But there's some interesting feedback here coming in. So we have actually a split here between flying more, flying less. Paying much more is also something which we need to start thinking about. I put a rather extreme question here with this 10 times more. But this is certainly something we need to discuss. Can it be possible to have airline fuels still without taxation? Can we have these levels on prices back, which were created when we had very large planes? Will we have these large planes again, etc., etc.? And we have already one very forward-thinking participant here with saying enjoying virtual traveling, which is actually a trend to watch. So more and more virtual reality traveling becomes possible. I still remember when I was for the first time using Google Earth at that time to check out the places where I lived as a child, which I found very, very interesting. But this is certainly also a trend to watch. So with that, I would like to thank you for the session here this morning. This afternoon, as I said, there's an interesting session coming up on co-creating scenarios. So just as a reminder here, feel free to join us there. If you want to co-create, send an email to Lisa, which was also on the link. And finally, there's also 2 more links which we're going to post if you want to follow more of our work. There's a newsletter you can subscribe to, and we hope that we'll stay in touch to jointly create desirable futures in the airline industry and elsewhere. So thanks very much for joining today.